I was really concerned about the season 9 and forward of the show because it appeared to me like it was becoming a one-trick pony. I was not as enthusiastic.
Ian Roussel spent 9 years turning scrap metal into machines nobody had seen before. Then the builds stopped, the episodes went quiet, and his fans were left staring at an empty schedule with no explanation. Some said he was sick. Some said the network forced him out. Some even swore he had vanished into the desert and cut off the outside world for good. Nobody ever heard it from him directly, so the internet wrote its own ending instead. The sad truth is nothing like the story fans told each other for years, and it exposes what 9 years of quiet, thankless work can cost a person. What really happened to Ian Roussel? The rumor that started spreading online. By late 2019, message boards built around custom car culture had noticed something was off. Something small at first that nobody thought much of until it kept going. New episodes of Full Custom Garage were taking longer to appear. Ian's usual rhythm of builds, once steady enough that fans could track his output like a season calendar, had slowed to something closer to a trickle. Online forums did what online forums do best. They filled the gap with theories, and the theories multiplied faster than any actual information did. Some viewers were convinced he was seriously ill, pointing to the slower pace as evidence of something being wrong behind the scenes that nobody wanted to say out loud, the kind of quiet health scare a private person might understandably choose not to announce. Others assumed the network had quietly pulled the plug, and nobody had bothered to announce it, treating the silence itself as proof of cancellation. A smaller but louder group insisted he had simply walked away from fame altogether, retreating somewhere off the grid and cutting off contact with the outside world entirely. A version of the story that only grew more elaborate the longer the actual silence lasted, picking up new details every time it got repeated in a fresh comment thread. None of those theories came from Ian himself, and none of them came from anyone close to the production either. They came from absence, from the particular kind of anxiety that builds when a public figure who used to be reliably visible suddenly is not, and from a fan base that loved his work enough to need an explanation, even an invented one, rather than sit with an unanswered question for months at a time without any real information to fill it. What actually happened traces back much further than 2020 to a show that was never really built to survive being treated like ordinary television in the first place. The show built to have no drama. Ian Roussel never set out to be a television personality. Long before any camera crew showed up, he had already spent decades as a self-taught fabricator working out of a small shop in Southern California, building a reputation the slow way through word of mouth in the underground custom car scene rather than through any kind of publicity push. He skipped college entirely, choosing instead to learn through years of hands-on trial and error, bouncing between shops and absorbing every technique he could before eventually opening a workshop of his own, building his name one commission at a time rather than chasing recognition. The same way most respected fabricators in that world still build a reputation today. His first appearances on camera came through hot rod documentaries in 2005 and 2009, followed by a single guest appearance on the series Car Warriors in 2011. Small credits that mattered far less to him than the actual builds happening in his shop between them. By his own account, even Full Custom Garage itself began almost by accident, after someone approached him about making a simple DVD around 2003, an idea that slowly grew into something much bigger over the following decade of steady, unhurried reputation building. When MAVTV eventually offered him a full series in 2014, the appeal for viewers was exactly how little it resembled a typical car show. There was no host performing enthusiasm for the camera, no manufactured rivalries between competing builders, no artificial deadlines designed purely to create tension. It was just Ian, a torch, and a build, filmed with the same unhurried focus he had always brought to his actual work, long before any of it was being recorded. Each episode followed a loose structure of introducing a build, working through the design in real time, and executing it however long that actually took. A format that trusted viewers to find the process itself interesting rather than needing a manufactured crisis every few minutes to hold their attention. That approach carried real credibility with it, too. His builds were not just admired online. Some of the completed cars were purchased and shipped to collectors in Japan, Germany, and the Netherlands, and one of his more ambitious projects, a car nicknamed Space Junkie, was later featured at the Barrett-Jackson auction in Scottsdale, Arizona, the kind of placement that only happens when serious buyers, not just casual fans, are paying attention. A separate build, a heavily reworked Thunderbird, was scheduled to appear at a major hot rod event in February of 2020, right before the production slowdown that would later feed so much online speculation. Evidence that his output stayed genuinely active up until the very edge of the period fans would later treat as a mystery. That simplicity and craftsmanship is precisely what made the show beloved, and it is also what made it fundamentally mismatched with how modern television usually wants a hit to behave, which set up a tension that had nothing to do with mystery and everything to do with production reality. The gap nobody explained. Full Custom Garage never actually ran on a consistent yearly schedule the way most reality shows do. And that inconsistency is where a lot of the confusion started. Season 1 aired across the spring of 2014, only 10 episodes long. Season 2 did not arrive until the following January, running in scattered bursts through most of 2015. Season 3 landed in the spring of 2016 at just 8 episodes, and Season 4 stretched into the summer of 2017 with 15 episodes of its own, followed by another pause before Season 5 arrived over the winter of 2018 into 2019. Later seasons followed a similarly irregular rhythm, with production tied less to a fixed network calendar and more to how long an individual build actually took to finish, since Ian never compromised on craftsmanship for the sake of a filming deadline, and a single complex vehicle could easily eat up months that a more conventional, script-driven show would never allow. The gap that fueled the loudest speculation ran from the spring of 2020, when Season 6 wrapped after 9 episodes, to February of 2021, when Season 7 finally began, a stretch of roughly 11 months with almost no new episodes and very little public activity from Ian directly. That window lines up almost exactly with the period when television and film production across the country slowed to a crawl or stopped entirely because of the pandemic, a disruption that hit small, independent productions like this one especially hard, since there was no large studio infrastructure behind it to keep things moving, no backup crew, no second unit, nothing to fall back on beyond one man and one shop. A production gap caused by a global shutdown in filming is a far less dramatic explanation than the ones circulating online, but it is the one the actual episode record supports. And it is a pattern that played out across dozens of small independent productions during the exact same window, most of which never generated the same kind of speculation because their hosts were not already known for staying quiet between projects and letting the work do the talking instead. Season 7 did arrive, running for 13 episodes into early 2022. Proof on its own that nothing had permanently ended. What the rumors got wrong was not just the cause of the silence. They got the silence itself wrong, too. The public appearance, no one mentions. While fans online were debating whether Ian had vanished entirely, he was doing something that quietly contradicts the entire premise of that theory, talking to reporters and showing up in public, in a way that left an actual paper trail rather than just a rumor to argue about. In June of 2021, right in the middle of the supposed mystery years, he sat down for an interview with a regional newspaper ahead of an appearance at a car show in Spokane, Washington, where he spent 2 full days meeting fans in person and discussing his work in detail with anyone who walked up to his display. In that conversation, he described his relationship with building custom cars as something closer to a compulsion than a career choice, admitting he was not even especially passionate about cars themselves so much as obsessed with the process of shaping raw material into something that had not existed before. He also confirmed, plainly and without any air of secrecy, that he lived and worked out of his home in the Mojave Desert, a detail some later retellings of his story would treat as some kind of dramatic late-career retreat from civilization, a hermit's exile from the industry that made him famous. It was not a retreat. It was simply where he had already been living and building for years, long before anyone online started speculating about him disappearing into the desert. And it was a location he spoke about openly, rather than one he was trying to hide. He talked in that same conversation about his builds being shipped internationally, to buyers in Japan, Germany, and the Netherlands, evidence of a career that was, if anything, expanding rather than quietly ending during the years fans assumed he had gone dark. None of that fits the version of the story that spread across forums during the same period. A man giving newspaper interviews, standing behind a table at a public car show, shaking hands with strangers for 2 straight days, and shipping finished vehicles overseas to paying collectors, is not a man who has cut off contact with the world. It is, if anything, the schedule of someone whose business was still functioning normally, while a section of his own fan base online had already convinced itself otherwise, which raises the more interesting question of what actually did happen to the show a couple of years later. The season nobody was supposed to notice was the last one. Full Custom Garage kept going for 2 more seasons after that gap. An 8th season made up of 6 episodes that ran through the winter of 2022 into early 2023, and a 9th season, also 6 episodes, that aired between December of 2023 and January of 2024. Unlike the earlier gap, this ending did not come with months of unexplained silence beforehand. It came with a final batch of episodes that simply aired, concluded, and were never followed by an announcement of a 10th season. No press release, no farewell special, nothing that signaled to casual viewers that anything permanent was happening at all. There was no episode built around goodbyes, no on-camera acknowledgement that the show was wrapping up for good, which is exactly the kind of quiet exit that tends to get misread later as something more sinister than it actually was, especially once fans went looking for a 10th season months later, refreshed the same episode guides over and over, and simply never found one. By the time those 6 final episodes aired, Full Custom Garage had run for nearly 10 years and produced dozens of episodes across 9 uneven, unpredictable seasons. A run defined the entire way through by the same refusal to manufacture drama that had made it stand out from every other car show on the network in the first place. Ending that way, without spectacle, without a big network send-off, fits the pattern of everything Ian had done since he first agreed to put a camera in his shop. He had never performed for an audience before, and he was not going to start performing grief or nostalgia in the final episode either, not after nearly a decade of proving that the work itself was always the point, rather than the reaction it generated. What actually followed his television career says more about who he really is than any theory fans came up with during the quiet years. Why the legend outgrew the facts. Part of why the disappearance story took hold so easily has less to do with Ian Roussel specifically, and more to do with the kind of public figure he always was. He never gave interviews often, rarely posted personal updates between builds, and treated his own privacy the same unhurried, unbothered way he treated a difficult weld, something to be handled quietly and correctly rather than performed for an audience. That reserve is common among builders who came up through the underground custom car scene rather than through modern influencer culture, where visibility itself is often treated as part of the job rather than an optional extra. Fans who grew up watching him assumed his low profile online meant something was wrong, when in reality it simply meant he had never adjusted his habits to fit an era where absence gets treated as evidence. His influence in that same underground scene never depended on how often he posted or spoke publicly in the first place. Younger fabricators who came up watching Full Custom Garage have pointed to his willingness to combine materials and eras without worrying about which category a finished build technically belonged in. Treating a car as a sculpture first and a vehicle second, a philosophy that shows up now in backyard builds and small independent shops that never appeared on television at all. That kind of reputation travels through actual builds and word of mouth inside the community, not through a constant stream of public appearances, which is exactly why his relative silence between 2020 and 2022 read as far more alarming to casual viewers than it ever did to people who understood how he had always operated. The myth of the vanishing genius is a satisfying story, precisely because it turns an ordinary production gap into something closer to legend. The same way any beloved but private figure eventually gets mythologized by an audience that wants their hero's absence to mean something bigger than logistics. The real explanation was simply less interesting than the one people wanted to believe, which is often exactly how these stories start in the first place, and it rarely has much to do with the person the story is actually about. What he built after the cameras stopped. Ian Roussel did not disappear after Full Custom Garage ended. He started a YouTube channel called Full Custom Ian, built specifically around the kind of long-form, uncut fabrication process that a network schedule had never fully allowed him to show. Posting builds at whatever length the actual work demanded, instead of trimming them down to fit a broadcast time slot. Free from the constraints of a producer controlling the pacing or a network deciding how many episodes a season needed, the channel let him continue the same self-taught, scratch-built approach that had defined his entire career, openly citing influences like Gene Winfield, Ed Roth, and George Barris, legendary figures from the same hand-built custom car tradition he had been quietly working inside of since long before television ever noticed him. None of that fits a story about a broken man hiding from the world, and none of it resembles the kind of retreat the online rumors described, the wounded celebrity nursing a grievance somewhere out of sight. It fits a craftsman who spent a decade tolerating the parts of television that never suited his temperament, in exchange for reaching an audience that genuinely valued the work itself, and who walked away the moment that trade stopped feeling worth it to him. The sad part of Ian Roussel's story was never a mysterious vanishing act, a secret illness, or a forced network exit. It was simply the ordinary, unglamorous grind of independent television production. Irregular seasons, a pandemic that stalled an entire industry for the better part of a year, and a devoted fan base that filled every gap in information with the most dramatic explanation available. Because a boring truth rarely spreads as fast online as an exciting rumor does, and a quiet man who never corrected the record in real time only made the rumor easier to believe. He kept building the entire time, through the gap, through the quiet seasons, through the ending nobody announced, in the same shop with the same hands, using the same instinct for turning raw metal into something nobody had asked for, but everybody wanted once they saw it finished. He just stopped doing it inside a format that was never really built for someone who never wanted the spotlight to begin with, and started doing it instead in a format that finally let the work speak for itself, without a network standing in the way. If Ian Roussel was building the whole time and never actually vanished, why do you think the disappearance story spread so much faster online than the far more ordinary truth ever did? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.